Hey guys, welcome back to another video where we will be looking at AgilePoint connector for Azure Functions. Azure Functions is a serverless compute service provided by Microsoft Azure. It allows you to run your code in the cloud without having to worry about managing servers and infrastructure. With Azure Functions, you can create small, single-purpose functions that are triggered by various events such as HTTP requests, timers, message queues, or database changes. They can be used to process data, generate content, create backend services, machine learning, etc. Azure Functions supports multiple programming languages including C Sharp, JavaScript, Python, PowerShell. You can write your own functions using these languages and deploy them to Azure, where they are automatically scaled and executed in response to specified triggers. Let's look at this in action. Now, before we get started, the first thing is to create the Azure function itself, and you can do it in your preferred code editor. I'm using Visual Studio for this case, and if you see, I've created a very simple function over here. What it is doing is it is taking some input parameters from message body. Here is my structure of my class. I'm passing in some of the customer demographic parameters, and after that, I'm rating them whether they are a high risk customer or a low risk customer. Now, once this has been created, you will go ahead and publish it to Azure. So you can right click and say publish and just hit the publish button over here. Now, in my case, I've already published it. I've created an Azure function over here in my Azure environment. And if I drill down, you'll see this is up and running now. And there are some app keys which are available for this as well. What I'm going to do is, as a next step, I'm going to go back to AgilePoint and go ahead and create a connection to the Azure functions. Now I can create an access token both at a global level or an app level. If I create it at a global level, I can reuse it across applications. If I create it at an app level, I'll restrict its usage only to be used within the particular app. In my case, I'm going to create a global level access token. So I'm going to go to Manage, App Builder, Global Access Token. Now I already have created an MS Azure Function Access Token, but I'm going to show you how to create it from scratch. You can go ahead and search for it, select MS Azure Functions, click Next, give it a name. Provide the function app name, which you can get from your Azure environment. In my case, it is called Predict Score. This is something I provided when I created the Azure function over there in Azure. And next, it is asking me for the master key. You can go back, go to App Keys, and over here, you can click on this button to get the master key. I'm going to go ahead and click Copy, Paste, Test Connection. So the connection is successful, and you can go ahead and click Save button. Now in my case, I've already created the access token, so I'm going to cancel this out. Next, I'm going to go to App Builder, click on Recent Apps. You'll see one of the apps listed over here is MS Azure Functions, which I've created. I'm going to go ahead and open the process model. What you'll see over here is there is an activity group which is dedicated to Azure Functions. There's one activity over here called Invoke Function. You can drag and drop that. I'm going to show you the configuration. You can give it a nice looking name. Select the access token which you had configured from the drop down. It will list down all the available functions. I have only one of them called Predict Score, if you remember from my Visual Studio project. So I've selected that. The method uses post. Next, I have to specify my request structure. So I can paste in the request structure. Either I can read it from a variable or I can provide a payload. In my case, I'm going to provide a payload, and then I can map the request. Once the schema mapper is up, on the left-hand side, what you're seeing is the AgilePoint schema, the form and process variables. And on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is the Azure function structure. So I can just do a quick mapping. And I can do a similar thing for the response. In response, all I'm reading back is the risk level. So I've entered the sample payload over here. and I'm mapping back the response received from Azure function back to AgilePoint schema in a variable called store risk level. Now my scenario is pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill out a form with some customer information. It will invoke the Azure function and show the risk level on the next form. I've already published out this application, so I'm going to go to Work Center, My Apps, Azure Functions, fill in some information. Going to fill up phone number, and I'm going to put him as under 18 years age because that was my condition for flagging it as a high risk customer. And I'm going to go ahead and click submit. If I go back to my inbox, click on task, open the process viewer. I'm going to open it in a new tab. Now you can see that the form got submitted, the Azure function was invoked, and I have another task. I can go to participants, open it, and see the results. So it is showing me the risk level is high. So as you could see, we now have a connector to invoke Azure functions, which can be invoked as part of the bigger business process. Thanks a lot for your time.